The Sanskrit word Maya is frequently translated as illusion. However, the word actually means something not suggestive of illusion as we have come to understand it in English. The root of the word Maya comes from the root sound ma. Ma comes from the root of the word measurement. Ma and measurement arise from the same semantic root. So Maya actually means that what we see as the measured, in the sense of Western mathematics, as when we measure the size of something, is circumscribed. Maya means that the measured is not. The misapplication of that word is that it means that the world is illusion. The perceptual world that we see with our eyes and that we experience with all of our senses is something like a hallucination. But is the perception of a beautiful sunset an illusion? Is the perception of a lovely creature, a butterfly, a hummingbird, a fox, a coyote, an illusion? Are the bodies of other human beings perceptual illusions? The reason why we have to go deeply into this question of Maya is that it will determine what our relationship to the world is. If the word Maya means hallucination, illusion, something that you can get caught up in as a misperception, then the world is not a favorable place to live in terms of truth. It will cast a spell of illusion over your life, over your senses, in your mind, so that you are not able to grasp what we would call the essentialness of existence. But to return to my question, is the flight of a bird an illusion? To return to the word Ma gives the correct answer and explores the understanding that we need to go into together. If the word actually means that that which is measured is an illusion, then it's only in the sense of fragmented consciousness projecting its measurements onto sense experience that is the real illusion. In other words, a kind of mathematical consciousness that we bring to experience where everything is chopped up into pieces and then put together into a kind of wholeness. That wholeness, according to Maya, is an illusion because it's just the sum of the parts of a measured mind. The objects of a measured mind putting together a sort of wholeness, which is all based on thought, measurement, increments, numbers, distance. Like an automobile, for example. Let's take that as an example. We say an automobile, a car, or a truck is a composed whole. It's a whole object, and it has lots of parts in it. And we see a kind of unity in the fact that we can get in our car and drive it. It's proof that that thing is unified. But I would say that based on the word Maya, that automobile is an illusion. In the sense that the wholeness it describes is just a byproduct of its ability to perform a function. Whereas the flight of a bird is something completely different. And I think if we move into a more organic understanding of what the world is, we can really appreciate where this concept of Maya comes from and what it is intended to open up in terms of understanding in the human being. I think the original problem which the word Maya tried to confront was that the world is changing. The world is changing, and because of its changing nature, it said it is not real. But the word Maya never referred to a changing world. It only referred to a measured world. A world in which a measuring consciousness projects measurements onto things and relates to them as such, as measured objects, and seeing all of exteriority as lots of measured entities all interacting with each other. That is the real sense, I believe, in which the word Maya was used to state that the common experience of the human being is an illusion. An illusion because it is precisely caught up in ideas of division and separation and incremental consciousness that imposes the belief system upon reality that it's nothing but a bunch of churning objects all separate from one another trying to reach unity. But that's just the world of the scientific mind, actually. It's the mind that carries forth the notion that everything is inherently broken up and chaotic until we measure it and put it all together with a mathematical mind and create that false kind of unity that's represented by a car. But there must be, outside of that projected world, another real world in which hummingbirds fly, in which coyotes run, in which snakes oscillate and pulsate in the sand and under rocks. There must be a whole other order of reality that actually is in what we see, in what we experience in our senses. And even though changing, it is essentially non-measurable. We don't project measurement onto animals. We feel the life of an animal, or even of a particular beautiful visual location, such as Sedona, with all of these miraculous rocks. These rocks that seem like they're alive because they're different from day to day based on the light that falls on them, based on how we're feeling, based on all sorts of things, based on our own spiritual condition, the spiritual condition that we perceive out of. So it seems that there's actually two kinds of worlds. One is an illusion, and it's one that many human beings live in, which is that of the measured consciousness and what it produces. But the other is a flowing reality apprehended spontaneously by the senses, and which speaks to the living nature of being present with sensitivity and vulnerability to experience itself. That is, experience is nourished as we relate to the organic world in our consciousness, which is changing, which is moving, but is not illusory. Yes, it's transient, but transience does not imply illusion. So this world of becoming, which can be quite confusing for us because it causes both joys and sufferings, is not so much an illusion as it is a changing, vibrating, immeasurable experience. It's an experience in which we are involved. It's like being inside of a movie as opposed to outside of the movie looking at the movie. So if you're inside the movie, you're part of the movie. That's actually an argument for a non-separative relationship with that movie. The fact that it's a movie does not make it unreal. It only makes it delicate, fragile, impossible to put into a container and make it stay still and still perceive it as living. So if the illusion of separation and mathematical consciousness is transcended in a sensitive heart awakening to the very nature of the real world, then we have a different kind of reality. And the word Maya then can now stand truly what it stands for, which is that the mind that perceives literal distinctions, literal objects, the relationships and interactions with literal objects, the measured universe, that in itself is illusion. And the kind of reality we create in our consciousness through ongoing use of measurement, that truly is what is not. It is Maya. It is that which is not. It's the measured which is not in existence. So, in spite of all of the so-called grandiose accomplishments of science that we can point to, such as GMO crops and the littering of our stratosphere with space debris junk that floats eternally around our satellites, and our cell phones which cause perhaps various forms of electromagnetic-based cancers, all the grandiose, wonderful developments of science that we always insist are part of civilization. Instead of blindly accepting that it's really important to know how many inches exist between the earth and the sun, like that's a very important thing for children to know in school, how many feet or miles exist between the earth and the sun. Instead of that universe, which is completely created by a kind of distanced relationship between the subject and the object, I suggest we culture our consciousness so that it can begin to live inside a real moment. A moment in which we completely trust our entire experience, our senses included, our mind. And so that to me is the beginning of the waking up out of Maya into the Atman, into the supreme self, the true self, which itself underlies all measurement.
When you're meditating and you reach Samadhi, you're in a place where you're not in duality.
But you see, if we call it a place, we've measured it again. We go into Samadhi together if our meditations go deep enough. When our mind falls through, our mind will drop out, and you'll feel the dropping sensation that you've reached the bottom of your mind, the very bottom layer of your own mind, and you know you've sort of gone beyond thought at that point because there was nothing going on in that moment. So Samadhi does in fact wake you up out of the dream of addiction to measurement, and it also takes you out of experience as a whole. But I would like to suggest that Samadhi might be something that we can live in all the time.
That's what I was dealing. How is I can feel, I can imagine Samadhi in meditation, but non-duality in life, in moving around and living my life, I can't imagine it.
And it's a good thing you can't imagine it, because that sort of state is not going to fit into your mind. That's why we talk about non-duality as going beyond the mind. The mind, again, is a measuring device, essentially. It measures everything. It's always measuring things. Even now, I can see every shape of every seat and every person in this room. I could see the whole room. I could see all the shades with the blinds and the art. So billions of computations of measurement are going on for me to have this relationship with you. But if I fall asleep to the one who is in the midst of that, then my whole experience is an illusion. But if I understand the source of my existence, then it's no longer illusion, merely. It may have a semi-illusory quality. Better to say transient. It's better to adopt the language of transience like the Buddhists do. You see, that's the central theme in Buddhism, the problem of change and transience, the fact that everything is going to die. That was the problem that the Buddha confronted, correct? He looked at dying people, sick people, he said, I've got to go beyond this. This is a big trap. And so he went into Samadhi. He took instruction from first Hindu teachers, and later on he fell back into his own meditation. But no matter how high you go in Samadhi, you do return to this experience of a world. That's not necessarily bad. Now you may say, well, my judgments come up then. Well, that's when you have to become responsible for the activity of your own mind. Watch all that as much as you can without becoming awkward and overly self-controlling, now guarding against your own judgments. You have to begin to sort of welcome everything as an ongoing stream of acceptable experience, both the good and the bad. And you will begin to see, if your meditative consciousness reaches deeply into pure consciousness, that you never actually forget the non-dual. You never forget it. So that in the background of the mind, you could be completely in that empty freedom, even while you're bound, even while you're engaged in relationships. But that's a journey for you to make. I can describe it, but that's what is being offered to you. What I'm offering in terms of darshan is meant to jumpstart your consciousness again and again so that you go into this wakeful condition and you never come out. That's where this is navigating itself toward, if you want to go that far with me.
I'm thinking about what you're talking about from a fixating point of view, from fixating. And in relationship to, like, if I just saw you and you passed and I said, oh, hi, David, how have you been doing? And that question itself, you know, I'm getting to the point where I almost want to say, I don't even want to discuss that. Because it's like, that will make me sad to even talk about it.
What would you like to say? What would
I
be
don't
the
know
idea?
what to say.
So you've got to say that because there's nothing else to say. It's got to start off in that kind of inane way. It's sort of stupid to say how you're doing, and it brings up an area you really don't even want to invoke, right. But it's affectionate. It's an affectionate form of ignorant greeting.
Yeah.
But that's all we have with each other. Everything begins that way, but then it can deepen. So once I answer you, and we look into each other's eyes, and we begin paying attention to each other, I can say, well, today's been pretty good, and you know, I just got back. And then as we listen to each other and get into the rhythm of our energies, we can actually begin to transform each other's consciousness inside that weird location where we had to begin, which was a kind of awkward greeting, a greeting that meant nothing. Mm-hmm. But much of what we say and do is like that. Mm-hmm. There's so much that we don't mean what we say, and so much seems to be wasted on superficial talk. But
so play out the relative.
Exactly.
Play it out and just say,
don't judge it.
It's been a really crappy day today.
Don't judge it. Because by the end of the conversation, we might be saying to each other, I'm the Supreme Self, and so are you, David. Even though that's not going to create the Supreme Self, who knows? We may actually create it with each other.
Right.
And have a really interesting talk. But there's sort of a forgiveness you have to have for the coarse nature of relative exchanges. It's a very, very beautiful topic you brought up. because you have to be very sensitive to notice how rough, textured daily existence is, even when you say hello to someone. But if your heart is open and you're feeling buoyant love and unity in your own consciousness, when you speak to someone, they get that breeze. They feel the breeze of that, and it could be a whole different exchange. So the relative can be one or the other. Then sometimes you might see someone who's really suffering. Just walking down the street, someone who is really not doing well, and your eyes fall upon that person. And now they're part of your consciousness. So that's another thing. So we have to remain, like you said, open to the entirety of it so that the play can continue.
Because the judgment shuts it down.
That's
what you're talking about. The perception becomes Maya because you're shutting it down.
Right. You're measuring it. Because you're wanting it to be a certain way. And the reason why you're wanting it to be a certain way is because you're afraid that if it's not a certain way, you don't know what's coming. And so you're guarding. You're guarding and you're holding. You're afraid. You're a little paranoid. You're insecure. And so to wake up inside the bliss of consciousness is precisely the opposite effect, where you're sort of free-floating all the time with a mind that is unglued to this whole movement and play of experience, but allowing experience to play. And therefore you accept, and in that total acceptance, there's a kind of transcendence of it all. And that transcendence is love. So then you can be present as love with someone. Let's forget about non-duality for the moment. You can actually be present as open feeling, presenting yourself as an open field of pure feeling to another being, and potentially offer whatever there is in that, moment by moment, to whoever you happen to run into, to whatever you happen to run into, to nobody. We can live in a very high state of ecstasy. But to do that, your frequency has to merge into the Supreme. Your individual frequency, what you call you, whoever you think that is, the summation of all of your experiences and the identity that's produced in those experiences, if that gets sufficiently activated with spiritual energy in the form of light, devotion, and Kundalini-shakti energy, you can actually pop out of the spell of your own limited identity. And the more you do that, and then ground, you can't just do that, you do that and then you ground, the more ecstatic your whole life will become. Released into the prior consciousness, the a priori consciousness that really is the same in everything. It's the same in a dog, it's the same in a mountain, it's the same in a tree. And so you begin to feel that primary unity with everything. And then you'll see maybe that whatever this play is in experience is actually happening on that level. It's not happening out there somewhere the way we once thought it was, that somehow we were looking out into the world, this world that seemed like we were in it, stuck in it, moving in it. We're actually all arising inside of a profoundly clarified condition. That usually takes a lot of meditative experience over years and commitment so that one can cut through the whole movement of the mind's temptation to measure and suffocate, because fear is a real factor. Fear is what underlies that measurement consciousness, the fear that everything is out of control and you somehow have to tame it with your measurements, with your judgments. So a beautiful atmosphere is being created now, actually. If you're allowing your sensitivity to meet me in this place, if you're just letting yourself be easy and quiet, you see that I'm not actually talking theory at all. It sounds theoretical when I begin talking, but as soon as we get into it and begin to feel what's happening, then there's a different activity going on. And you can feel how much you are part of that. That your consciousness is making all this transformation happen in you. Are you with me? Are we together in this? Very good. Bliss is what liberates the mind. Theories don't liberate the mind. Ideas can liberate it a little bit, some interesting ideas, profound ideas that you contemplate when you're reading a wonderful book that's meaningful. That can help liberation. But in just one area, when we're dealing with such a profound level of happiness, that itself sets the mind free completely, because then the mind is not searching anymore. It's not engaged in the endless search for the experience of happiness. So when that bliss comes into the mind begins to actually rest in it and love it, recognize it, and become enlightened by it, infused in bliss. So then the mind becomes bliss. And if you can have that experience, you'll be a very different kind of human being. And you will recognize the profound suffering that's going on, because you'll see clearly at the same time you'll see what you've actually understood. And there's your release, there's your profound enlightenment, is that you recognize now that you have recognized. You've awakened into your awakening. You've opened into your openness, and now there's openness.
So the mind can only be unhappy.
I'll have to think about that. I don't want to rush in and say yes. I know when I stub my toe, I'm not very happy, and I'm not sure it's my mind that's unhappy.
In Zen they say, be here now, be in the present, but get out of the way when a bus is coming.
Oh, that's beautiful. Is that contemporary Zen?
Yeah.
Did you hear that? That's a good teaching. It's important to follow those teachings too.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear it.
Be in the present, but get out of the way when a bus is coming.
So now there's just the heart. I'm wondering if you're with me. That there actually has been a real turning of reality inside this room during this very short time. that actually, if you look at the eyes through which you're seeing now, and if you feel your whole body, especially your heart, your pelvis, the whole of you, you can feel that something has come awakened. You're not asleep. The vibration is too high to let you sleep. You can't go to sleep in this sort of thing because there is no sleep in it. And so may you be blessed to always taste this. May you be blessed to always be in this condition. And if you somehow fall out of this condition, then you know where to come to revive it. It's the greatest privilege and honor for me to offer this to you. I'm not on some superiority trip up here at all. I hope that I can clarify that. It's really a profound gesture of release and liberation itself to offer this. It's even more satisfying than whatever liberation one might have created in oneself alone. So to give this is much more satisfying even than to have it for oneself. Much, much more gratifying than to share this is the most exquisite thing. It's like having a wonderful meal with friends where you're all eating food, you're loving at the same time, the food is delicious and everybody gets happy. It's like that. Only the food we're enjoying is bliss food, the food of divine bliss. The bliss of the self. Or the non-self if you happen to be a Buddhist. Sometimes people actually feel their heart break in this room. I was in Fairfield, Iowa a couple of months ago. I was invited by the very large meditation community there. There are thousands of people who are living in this small town in southeast Iowa. They congregate there just in order to create a meditative community. There are many different lineages there, many different forms of meditation going on, everything you can imagine. And I saw people who had been practicing meditation for many years come into the room with me, really advanced meditators, been doing this for 40 years, whatever practices they had been practicing each day. And they would talk about their heart finally beginning to feel itself in the room with me, that something new was finally happening after so many years of meditation, and people talked about it almost like the pain of birth happening inside the heart. And when I saw that, it made me realize how precious this work is, because we have got to open into that new birth. We've got to open up into the birth of the heart so that the heart takes over everything, not live in the measured mind, which in today's culture has taken over everything. The consciousness of the banker, the consciousness of the economist, the consciousness of people who are always thinking in terms of increments and gain and loss, what can be acquired. So when this starts to open, it's like the heart of a hummingbird opening. It's got that innocence in it, that delicacy. And so let the heart break open. Let your heart come open. Those tears are good tears. If you cry because of that, that's not real sorrow. That's the beginning of you finding out who you really are as a human being. Without that kind of sorrow, there's no spiritual progress. There are only illusions of achievement that are going on in the mind about religion and spirituality. So the heart must be born in its own fabric, its own terrain. And only bliss gives the heart what it wants to taste. And when it does, something happens. It opens like a flower, and then the fragrance begins to come out. It's very electrifying in here. I'm wondering if you can feel it. It's actually electrifying. Go ahead.
There is profound bliss in the recognition that what we hold in meditation in the heart opening, going into that deeper silence of where, if you choose to call it God is, or Supreme Being is, and you take that out into the world. I had an experience today in Walmart where the person in front of me didn't have enough money for their purchase, and it was a very small amount, and I paid it. And the cashier was in observance of that, and he asked my name and told me his name. And it was a very sweet sort of exchange between us in recognition of Namaste, the brilliance of extending love in a situation that it's monetary, it's incremental. How much do you have to give that may or may not fall short? And as I walked out of the store and down the street to my car, it was almost as though I wasn't walking, because there was a sweet, profound understanding that love is as love does. And there's a recognition of it in yourself. And whether anyone else recognizes it is beside the point. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
You are the one that reaps.
But others
the
will
beauty of
recognize it. Others will recognize it.
Yeah.
And your behavior was transformed by the presence of love. So instead of just watching someone, you decided to fill a gap in someone's life in a very spontaneous and innocent way, where you weren't calculating, you weren't measuring. Even though you were in the field of measurement, you were free of measurement, which is why you could give without thinking. And then a healing takes place. Then you really begin to heal in the truest and deepest sense of what that means. So what we heal is the idea that we're all separate, that we're not in this together. That's wonderful. And to express it in a concrete way like that has its own beauty as well. The fact that it was something that you could actually see. It had real value in terms of limited values. So even in that field, it had an effect.
We have to notice those opportunities in any given day. They make themselves known in the most insignificant and ordinary ways. Even for just ourselves, when we wash our face and we take that mindfulness of touching the skin in a loving way to say, in this particular moment, I have skin, and there will be a time when I don't have skin, and I'll be in the mind of God. I'm always in the mind of God, but can I be in the wonder and the acceptance and the love of this moment? I have skin, and it has tactile feelings. It has nerve endings that feel that. I feel it in my hands and I feel it in my face. And there's great wonder in that, in the silence of it, in the observance of it.
How about touching someone else's skin?
That too.
You see what I mean? This is interesting because you're right, that it sort of begins with the self. And that if you don't actually open even to your own bodily consciousness to see what that is, you're not even in a position to actually share that sort of thing with another person. I would like to even take this to a higher level, if you don't mind, or a qualitatively different level. Let's not say higher, because higher has hierarchy in it, kind of superiority is built into that form of language. But being lit up inside of who one actually is in terms of this field of the heart can produce such a wave of intensity that you could walk through Walmart, not speak to a single person, and bless every life in the store. just by virtue of your presence there. Which is not to say we shouldn't show actual acts of generosity to others. No, that's not an argument to withdraw that aspect. Absolutely not. But to carry it to its highest limit, its deepest value, you are a sun inside of yourself. And when that sun of being opens, these rays are coming out in all directions in ways that you will never know. I get emails from people on the internet in other countries who have been studying my videos on YouTube for years. They've never even bothered to contact me. They just watch them and study them, and they have these experiences. And then they say, you know, I've never written to you. It's been about 3, 5, 7 years since I've been watching your tapes. I do it all the time, and my whole life is different. And I haven't even had the opportunity to speak to you or meet with you. So then I understand how profound this work is, and how it goes way beyond anything my judgment field can recognize. And so you can imagine the humility that that produces. Right? It's not like I'm great, it's just the opposite. It's my I is meaningless when it comes to this radiant sun. So it's my belief everybody can be transformed into this in a really powerful way. And that the time is right now. Right now, the earth is in such crisis on so many levels that it's easy now because of the intense frustration of the whole planet. The whole planet's ecosystem is panicking now. Okay? We are in that ecosystem. We are the eyes and the ears of the whole eco field that we live in. We're not separate entities. So now it's possible for some humans to take this journey back toward the primordial essences of being, and to awaken there, and to begin to radiate out of this field, which has given birth to this world, it's given birth to this solar system, it's given birth to this universe. And if you believe in other universes, other worlds. This is a very big phenomenon. And this is why all the scriptures insist that humans are God, essentially. That you are the God of the universe, even in that body. You just have to realize it. You are the highest God, anywhere. You just have to realize what that means. You can't just say, I am the highest God of the universe and tell others. It doesn't have any meaning. But when the experience comes that liberates your consciousness, liberates your intelligence, liberates your feelings, your compassion and love, then you're beginning to live inside that. Then it's a whole different something that's happening. And once you get deeper into that, it's non-stop. It's 24/7. It's forever. Even if this body were to be buried tomorrow, it has no meaning in terms of what that is. The timeless being is completely present now. Liberate in this body. If you're thinking of liberating after death, you're caught in the illusion that God is somewhere else and not here. That's the deepest illusion. I'm on fire now. I'm very warm and fiery and molten. I feel like that volcanic lava that comes out, that mountain that
Shouldn't
keeps...
have asked how you were doing. How are you doing, David?
How are you doing?
How am I doing? I'm okay right now.
Good. You feeling this volcanic
Yeah.
lava flowing
Yeah.
inside this loving embrace? You feel how it happens?
What if you say intimate rather than higher?
Yes, there's many better
How
words. But they all have meaning.
Yes,
We
but
can't
when
just-
you were saying higher.
Yes, sometimes
you
it's higher. Sometimes it's like walking to the top of Everest and looking from there. You say, I am on the highest of the high, and you actually have that sort of elevated feeling spiritually. But other times, it's intimate.
That's when it gets very hot. How intimate
Yes.
it becomes.
You're fond of the language of love and devotion. That's devotional language. It's beautiful. Are you getting ecstatic tonight with me? Isn't this beautiful? There's nothing to say. Just drink it up. I'm sort of nowhere. I can talk like I'm in it, like I'm out of it, like I'm against it, like I'm for it. I have no position on this. I'm like an attorney who can represent anybody.
No position is the best position.
I can represent a criminal, I can represent a saint, and it's all the same to me because they're all criminals and all saints. Huh? So, we have this whole range of experience as a human being. We can be not in a bliss state. We can be very tormented and full of agony and loneliness and despair. That's all real. Never forget about that. No matter how high you go spiritually, someone down the street from you could be in absolute torture and agony. And then there's somebody else on the other side of the street who's tasting the mystic state of St. Teresa of Avila in her living room or bedroom, having mystical ascent and seeing light. Imagine having these polarities. That's what this earth plane is all about, is you get to go everywhere here. Everywhere. And everywhere is valid. It's not bad if you're one of the people who were tortured, if you suffer. That's just more invitation to go deeper. It's a call to deeper and deeper understanding and intimacy in your own being. That's what suffering and agony is. But it's also agony in and of itself. Sometimes it feels like it has no meaning at all. It's non-redemptive. It's terrible, but you've got to see that part of life too. Otherwise, you just go into a fantasy world. You've got to have some suffering, or you have no basis for relating to anybody. There's a lot of bliss in this room now. If you're in it, I hope you survive it. But this is what I do. This is what I come out and do. And it's always different, and it's always the same. It's always the same and always different. What's your experience tonight?
It's been such a wide range. The meditation was very expanding, and then everything got very bright. There was a lot of light shifting, and gold light, and then everything became very loving and blissful, and it just seemed like we've been everywhere.
Beautiful.
Tonight.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Anyone else would like to share something? Anything that was important to you tonight? Anything that felt extraordinary or special or important in any way? Yes.
Certain moments there's just like Shiva and Shakti within. Like in certain moments when you say certain things. That happens every time in your presence, and I've never had it anywhere else in such an intense way. Great.
Good. He said the union of bliss and his own experience in the body, like the union of Shiva and Shakti in the way that the Hindus think about that, which is the union of what essentially it's energy and emptiness coming together. Anyone else? Thank you for that. Anyone else feeling beautiful tonight? Anyone feeling stuck? If you ever feel stuck and you would like to speak about that, that's also welcome. And through conversation, sometimes we can work through that very quickly. So I am open to receive anyone's communication, whether it's negative or positive. Yes.
I've been with you maybe a dozen times, something like that. And it's always, meditation has always been heart focused and opening. And today, all the energy was in the third chakra, which I accepted, but it just seems strange.
It goes where it's needed, and we don't know what it has in mind.
Mhm.
But it's a pretty endless process of continuing to awaken because there's no end to it. And your body is the place where this awakening interfaces. So you're going to feel lots of things. It may be in your head next time, or above your head somewhere, or in your throat. But many people will carry a kind of restriction in the solar plexus where all the emotions collect. Anger can collect there due to power issues around having power, losing power, being angry at having lost power. Vulnerability issues all happen in that area. Low self-esteem. So all of that, to get the Shakti in there moving is a very healthy thing because it sort of breaks up the solidity of that area. But each person is unique, and so as you might be having a third chakra opening, someone might be in Samadhi over here, or some other person might be in an ecstatic ascension experience. So the range is so wide. That's why I don't give too precise a teaching about this. That's why I don't come out with a map saying this is going to happen, because I've learned for many years that too much happens. And I'd rather leave people alone so they can find out what their experience is rather than project a message onto you. We'll talk about what's necessary as it comes up, and I'll address your concerns spontaneously as you begin to open, and I'll talk right to you some evening. You'll see, I'll say something that is so targeted to you that you won't believe it. And that's very, very mysterious how that happens, and I have no knowledge of how that happens, but it happens. It was nice to see some people who returned from last week. I'm very delighted that you returned. I hope these programs are serving you well. And just know that there's an open door here if you want to come back. I don't put any pressure on people. I don't sort of collect people and try to get them on membership lists. And it's just not my style. I have a very open policy. The heart is open, the doors are open. If you want to come to be with me, I also want to be with you. I look forward to it very much. Namaste, and be well.